First things first, I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. That is Nick Wright. And this is a very special Friday here at the show as we are joined by current and former members of the United States Armed Forces who will be hanging out with us, taking my side on almost everything today. You guys heard that? I said taking my side on almost everything today. No, but seriously, for that, we say thank you and welcome and enjoy the show, especially when I say stuff. So really,
happy Veterans Day to everyone.
Of course.
In studio, out of studio, very cool. Some of the stuff we're doing at Fox today, so I'm excited for it.
Yeah, one of them was trying to box me, trying to take me out before the show.
Because he saw how the show ended yesterday with you put me in a rear naked choke, and he's got my back. I already talked to him about it. That was planned. Good looking out, sir.
So we're good. We're good on that. Perfect. All right, let's get into some football last night. They call it Thursday night football. Good news and bad news for the Seattle Seahawks. The good news, they beat the Cardinals in a game where Russell Wilson threw 2 touchdowns. The bad news, they lost Richard Sherman for the season. It happened in the third quarter when he ruptured his ailing Achilles. So the Seahawks, they win. They're now 6-3 on the year, but big questions remain. Here's Richard Sherman now after the game.
I had gone pretty much the whole season not really making any drastic cuts. You know what I mean? I'm veteran enough. I know the plays enough where I was never in position where I had to make a super bad cut or it would probably popped a long time ago. But I just thought I could get the ball, and once it popped, it's just unfortunate I couldn't make the tackle. Just got to stay positive. That's all you can do.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Anybody else coming in?
First of all, it stresses me out that they made him take 2 steps before they handed him the crutches.
He was walking around on the sideline for the entire rest of the game.
He demanded to walk off the field, a lot like Tom Brady. Tom Brady would not let him carry him off the field. He demanded to walk from the sideline to the locker room. He wasn't going to be carted off. And it's a thing that we kind of have if we can. We'd much rather get up and walk and try to leave the game that way compared to being carted off. And also, it sends a message to your loved ones. You're injured, but the injury is not as severe as some of the other injuries.
And we're going to get to the game in a quick second, but just based on what Richard Sherman said, a quick follow-up to you, CC, is he's saying he was playing most of the season avoiding, like, drastic cuts and whatnot. How much does that hamstring you as a defensive back if you are actually thinking about certain steps that you have to make?
Very few of the players are healthy after training camp. What you do, your whole offseason, starting in March, is to build up this endurance so that you can make it through the season. And a lot of times, you get nicked in training camp. You go into the season with little injuries. I had 2 bad Achilles. I know exactly what he was saying. And I always thought that was going to be the injury in running a lot of routes, wide receivers and defensive backs, because there's so much explosive starting and explosive stopping and in and out of your breaks. Like he said, he was trying to avoid making a really sharp cut because he knows his body. But yes, when you're a skilled position player, you are going to battle these types of things. But he was professional enough and connected enough with his body that he knew that it was sore. And eventually, unless he had some time to let it heal, that's why it's so important as we go down the rest of the season. Nick, and you've been trying to emphasize this. If you can get that bye week, the bye week is it's worth so much more than people realize.
Well, and I just want to, before we talk about the actual game, just one more follow-up with you. So he had never missed a game in his career.
Yes.
This was his 105th consecutive start. Do you know what your number was after you broke your collarbone? You missed some time your rookie year, you missed some time your final year, but in your 14 middle years, you only missed 4 games. It was with the broken collarbone.
Yes.
From that moment until you left the Vikings, do you know how many games you played in a row?
No.
It's 144 straight games. It was 9 seasons of never missing a game. And I know the number mattered to you because you've told a story about how there was a game you didn't really know if you could go.
Right.
You started, you ran a couple routes, and you were like, I really shouldn't have been going today. You wanted to keep that number going. It's a Thursday night game. He knows the Achilles has been sore all year. Do you think the fact that he's never missed a game played into the fact and him wanting to maintain that Iron Man streak into him playing last night when maybe he shouldn't have?
Well, no, I thought in those situations you take into consideration, can I be effective? And he was effective doing his job. I took myself out of the game because I realized that I couldn't protect myself and I wasn't nearly the player. Richard was playing a good game. So most guys are playing with some type of injury, some type of nick and everything. So this is the decision that we make. as football players and as professional athletes that we're going to push our body as far as we can. And a lot of times, that's where you see the heroic effort that people don't know about because, wow, the guy performed well at a high level and he was injured. But this is very typical, that especially with football players, because we only have 16 games.
Right.
It's not like the NBA got 82 games. You'd be like, oh, man, it's a Thursday night. I'm going to take this one off. No, in the NFL, it's the mentality of the players to try to play through extreme pain and through extreme conditions.
Nick, remember when you came in that day and you had a sniffle and you're like, I'm going to do the show anyway? It's exactly the same thing as what happened to Richard Sherman. Same thing. You guys are like twins. Okay, but let's talk about the game last night. Adorable smile, by the way.
Thanks.
We all sat here and said Seahawks had to win this game. If they want to be playing deep into the season, they have to win this game. Seahawks went. It wasn't a dominating win. It wasn't the most beautiful win you ever saw. It wasn't a crushing blow, but they walked out of there with the W. How should the Seahawks feel now after this?
Terribly.
Yes.
Because they lost Richard Sherman. I mean, I am not going to do what so many of my contemporaries who talk about sports for a living do, which is preach about the importance of defense and then disregard defensive injuries. We saw this happen with the Kansas City Chiefs. They lose their very best defensive player, by the way, to the same injury, to a ruptured Achilles, a guy who had a sore Achilles, tried to play through it in week 1, Eric Berry, and not a single person did I hear that said, I had the Chiefs going 12-4. Well, now I'm going to change that. We talk about the importance of defense, and then we overlook it when a defensive player is lost for the season. The Seahawks offense is not good. They are making do with Russell Wilson having a few magical moments. We saw it last night on the double pirouette play to Doug Baldwin that ended up putting them in position for their final touchdown of the game. The play you're seeing right now was an unbelievable play. But that's their offense. Since Chris Carson went down, CC, they don't have a running game. The only team that has a less effective running game from their running backs is the Carolina Panthers. And we've talked all year about how bad their running game has been. They need a dominant defense. And with a banged-up Earl Thomas and now no Russell Wilson, how did they lose? I'm sorry, no Richard Sherman, pardon me. How did they lose last week? The Richard Sherman lookalike playing corner on the other side, the rookie, Shaq Griffith.
Yes.
He gave up the big play.
Oh, yes.
Well, now you're not going to have Richard Sherman on the other side. This is an enormous blow for a team that I thought no longer think that I thought could win the Super Bowl.
And the reason why it's such a big blow, because it changes the style for which Pete Carroll wants to play. We saw their front seven. Now, their front seven is as good as they get in football.
Yep.
I mean, they devoured Adrian Peterson, the quarterback, the amount of pressure they put on the quarterback during the game from all different angles. Defensive linemen, their linebackers blitzing. Their front seven can play at such a speed, but if you can't balance that front end off with the back end, where you can't play man-to-man coverage, because without Richard Sherman, they cannot play the amount of man-to-man that they've played. So Pete Carroll and that staff, how do they, over the next 6 games, adjust themselves and be able to win enough that they might be able to get in the playoffs? Because it's not like they got some commanding lead in their division. They don't have any time, for 2 or 3 game correction. They have to try to get this right. They're going to have to try to play a different style, just like we saw in New England, how they started off the season wanting to play man-to-man, and we're like, we don't have the personnel. Pete Carroll's going to have to figure this out and figure it out quick.
CC, we've talked all week. There are 7 good teams in the NFC. Only 6 are making the playoffs. A team that had no margin of error in Seattle, because like you mentioned, they're not leading their division. They just lost one of their, I would say, the 3rd most important player on their team. Russell Wilson 1, Earl Thomas 2, Richard Sherman 3, and Earl and Richard, you could probably flip-flop if you wanted to.
And to your point, we always talk about you lose a quarterback, you basically lose the season, and you're right. A lot of times, the J.J. Watt, they lost J.J. Watt, there was still hope for the season and all of it. You lost your emotional leader on this team. There's no doubt. I mean, the biggest weakness on the Seahawks defense or on the Seahawks team was always whoever's playing across from on the other side of Richard Sherman, that other defensive back. That was always that rotating position. Well, now you have to answer that question. You have to answer the Richard Sherman question. And you really lost like the heart and soul of who that team is, the guy that really rallies everyone. So I think that's when you put yourself.
Before we move on quickly, I have a question for you, CC. Who is the best team in the NFL now? Who is the best team? You can give me a list of teams because they'll all be wrong.
New England.
New England is not the best team. Give me another name.
Well, you asked me.
Hold
That's
up.
my
I'm going to
opinion.
tell you
Yeah,
why.
that's true.
Just
Well,
keep
Philadelphia.
going.
Point, Nick.
Philadelphia is not the best team. Give me another team. Name another team that you think it could be. Just say a team.
The purple, man. The Vikings.
Vikings. No, you want to know who the best team in the league is right now?
No, not really, but yes.
The only team with first-team All-Pros at almost every spot. The all-injury team. You got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. You got David Johnson at running back. You got Joe Thomas at left tackle. You got Odell Beckham Jr. at wide receiver. You got Eric Berry at safety.
Watt.
You got J.J. Watt. You got Richard Sherman. You got Deshaun Watson as your backup quarterback. Carson Palmer's your practice squad quarterback. You got Pro Bowlers everywhere on the all-injured team this year. It's a damn shame.
You got a few Hall of Famers on there.
You got Hall of Famers. You got first-team All-Pros. That team would be the Super Bowl favorite. Unfortunately, all those guys are done.
Man, if you want to keep doing this show, you better give me a heads up before we get on the picking teams, okay? I don't like lists. I don't like surprises. Right there, Mr. Smart Guy sitting on the corner.
Moving on here, it looks like Ezekiel Elliott will finally miss some time. The federal appeals court denied Zeke's request for an emergency injunction, and his suspension is effective immediately. Elliott's next appeal won't be till December 1st. The Cowboys play the Falcons, Eagles, Chargers, and Redskins before then. Nick, I ask you, can the Cowboys stay competitive without Zeke?
They absolutely can stay competitive, and as it turns out, we've talked about, should he have taken the suspension early in the year? Is it worried that it's going to go into the postseason? Now that we actually know how good teams are, this suspension, oddly enough, is coming at, if there's ever a good time for it, the perfect time for it. The Cowboys they've got their season back after being 2-3. They have 3 straight wins, and over their next 6, the only game they play against a team with a winning record is the game against Philly. Atlanta's at 500. The Chargers are under 500. Washington at 500. The Giants stink. Oakland's not very good. So if I were Zeke, by the way, I wouldn't even file that other appeal, because what you don't want is to win that briefly and then have the suspension kick in once the playoffs start if your team's in it. And now we get to see what this offense looks like without Ezekiel Elliott. Cris, you have been saying, you were the first person to say Zeke was going to be suspended. You were the first person to say it was going to be 6 games. And you have said all along he is serving those 6. Wasn't sure when, but he's serving them. We know the first one now is going to be Sunday.
And I don't think there's any really good time for the suspension, because we don't know what's going to end up. If they end up not missing the playoffs, well, it won't be the right time to take it. I'd much rather take it at the beginning of the season, because you know the momentum that they've gathered the last 3 weeks. How do they recapture that? How did that overall physicality, do they do that with Zeke not there? Because they don't have the personnel. So for me, I'm concerned about momentum. But a game like last night, it really helped them out, because Dallas is really, we can say they're battling Philadelphia, but let's just say, for conversation's sake, that they're battling for the wild card.
Exactly.
That's against Detroit, Green Bay, Carolina at 6-3, and Seattle at 6-3. But Carolina 6-3 and Seattle 6-3, they're totally different. The reason why? Look what happened to Seattle last night. So which position would you rather be in? Losing a superstar with a torn Achilles, also having a bunch of other players banged up, or being Dallas Cowboys knowing that you're going to get Zeke back and you already have 5 more wins? So I think Dallas can still make the playoffs. I think they can salvage the suspension. How they're going to be able to do that? They have to become a throwing football team. And I'm not talking about throw the ball 40 to 45 times. I'm talking about how you come out of the locker room. My overall intent to attack the defense is through the passing game, and then I kill them off with the running game. I believe that's how they're able to generate the big plays, to be able to get the game, get ahead in the game, milk the clock, and allow that undersized defense to play about 25 to 28 minutes, which they've shown they can be very effective at doing.
Here's why that could be a little bit of a problem. In the Cowboys' last 3 wins, Zeke carried the ball 27 carries, 33 carries, 26 carries. Do you feel like maybe they were a little over-dependent on Ezekiel Elliott, and now suddenly, even though it's a system situation, they're going to have to change their motif a little bit?
I actually look at that, not to say you're wrong, I just look at it the exact opposite. I think the Cowboys...
Such a nice way of saying you're wrong, by the way, and I'm going to use that on people.
I think the Cowboys recognized, listen, Zeke's a big asset for them moving forward. Not just this year, but for this contract, probably the next contract. With a young running back, you don't want to put 320, 340 carries on him. Like, there's a threshold. We've seen guys, it's usually, in fact, I way overstated it there. The number's usually 280. Like, once you get much over 280, you start to enter the danger zone. Anything over 300 is really the danger zone. Dallas knew they could use him like that because he was going to miss those 6 games, because he wasn't going to finish the season with a super high carry number. You've got to bank those wins where you can and use the best players on your roster as best as you can. I don't think Dak would be more prepared for these 6 games had instead of those numbers been 27, 33, 26, if they'd been 17, 23, 16. Because Dak still's practicing with these guys every week. He's been with these guys for 24 games. I just don't think that's...
Is it a different game plan? I mean, it's not a completely different game plan, but it's a little bit of a different. They're certainly not going to run the ball that much. Yeah, Alfred Morris and...
They're going to try to get the attempts because the physicality of the offensive line. You can't be physical pass protecting the whole game. But back to your question as far as did they make a mistake? Jenna, if we were to somehow you had to go out, you were sick from the show, we wouldn't be able to replace you with one person with doing 7. The bumps and everything. Yeah. No, we would need 2. Like, we would need 2 to get Nick and around because the things that you do, Nick and I don't do. Now, we're qualified broadcasters, but the way the show goes, we would have to add that additional. So it's just like Zeke. It's just not Alfred Morris and Darren McFadden. So we add those things because what do they do well? And none of them can do what Jenna would do. So none of them are a triple threat. So we would have to supplement, all right? Alfred Morris is a better between the tackles runner. Neither one of them score a lot of touchdowns, and neither one of them have breakaway NFL speed at this point.
Listen, I get that Zeke is the best player on the Cowboys, but if there's 3 guys on this team that if you told me we're going to miss 6 games, I'd be more worried about them. Number 1 is Dak. Number 2 is Sean Lee, because we've seen what happens to that defense when he's not there. And number 3 is Tyron Smith. So, like, I think Zeke is their most talented player. I think he's their most gifted player. I don't think he's one of their 3 most important players. I think they can get by, and you'll see it. Atlanta doesn't have a great defense. We'll see how they do this weekend against Atlanta, and then they have the really difficult game against
the one player they can't have suspended would have been Dak.
Right. But Dak's not getting him suspended.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, as far as missing. Right. Because he can't be replaced.
After Martellus Bennett was cut by the Packers, Nick Wright said the Patriots would be a good landing spot for him. Guess where Martellus Bennett ended up? Yep, the Patriots. Did you say that?
Did Nick say?
Oh, I might have said Dallas, and Chris might have said the Patriots,
well,
but whatever.
Anyway,
I like this way better.
That being said,
good script writing, Brumley.
I write the scripts that make the whole world sing.
I was giving you credit because there was a fact error in that one, so I was putting it on Brumley.
That was Brumley.
Go ahead, keep reading.
New England claimed Bennett off waivers yesterday. Mind you, Bennett with 701 yards, 7 touchdowns for the Patriots last season, so it seems like this would be a good fit. So, CC, because you brought this up yesterday and you thought this was a good idea, I ask you, how big a deal is this move for New England with what they currently have and where they're going?
There is no better garbage picker-upper in NFL history than Bill Belichick. Right. I mean, you think, all right, you cooked a bad meal. You're going to throw it out at night, you know, put it out by the curb. Guess who comes scoop it up? Bill Belichick will go through your garbage, take out something that you didn't think you could use or something that was half-baked or you take a few bite out of it, and he say, you know something? I see that I might be able to do something with them. Guess how New England can use him? Number 1, they just got an insurance policy in case Gronk gets hurt. Also, they haven't been great in the running game. They're not great in 3 receiver sets. So guess what their number 1 formation is going to be now? 2 tight ends. Guess who are 2 of the top 5 blocking tight ends in the NFL? Martellus Bennett and Gronk. So now as we start, the leaves have changed. It's starting to get colder. Watch New England in their running game and get their running game going. This is a huge asset for a guy who has been in the building. He knows how to buy into what Belichick wants. And Belichick, to be able to respond just like that, let you know, like, he's got plans for Marty. Marty had a great season with New England last year in getting that first Super Bowl.
All right, so I really like Martellus Bennett. I like his brother. I like what they stand for. I know their story from being when they were.
He sent a message to us yesterday.
From Houston. He did? Martellus Bennett did?
Yeah, he sent a message to Brian because I invited him to be on the show. I told him to retire from football and come in and sit right here. I also offered him that seat too, but.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love Martellus to join us at some point. I really like him. I don't like what he did here. Martellus Bennett signed with the Packers. Rodgers gets hurt.
Yes.
He then starts saying he might want season-ending surgery. So they cut him. Is he asking the Patriots didn't claim him thinking he's going to have the season-ending surgery that he was saying he wanted? Like, Cece, this is a little dirty pool, right? Like, this is.
Yesterday, you guys sort of mocked it and made it seem like it was okay. Like, oh, suddenly my shoulder hurts because Aaron Rodgers is there. I don't want to go out and play. It's really cold. We're at Lambeau.
I think if you decide.
Oh, no, Jenna, let me tell you something. If I'm playing at Lambeau Field and if I've made the announcement I'm retiring to the end of the season and Aaron Rodgers is out there and Hundley is their quarterback, you know something? All my aches and pains feel worse than what
Nick is saying that it had nothing to do with any of that.
If the organization, just like Vontae Davis in Indianapolis, they decide to cut him. If an organization can cut a player, why can't a player try to manipulate the system so that he can play for a winner?
Listen, I am the ultimate players guy. I get that. My point, I wouldn't have a problem with the guy saying, you know what, I don't want to play anymore. And that's the discussion yesterday was Aaron Rodgers is there. I'm good. I'll fight through it. Aaron Rodgers isn't there anymore. I don't want to play anymore. But a guy manipulating the system somewhat to get cut so he can then go to a different team, that one.
Well, how many times have we seen the organization do what they want to do, Nick? And you are a player union guy. I can't believe your take on it. Like, what did he do that was wrong?
Go ahead, Jenna.
I think I love what you're saying because if we start getting to a place where players just dictate what they want and what they don't want based on injuries that may or may not be real things, all of a sudden you have a very messy situation. I know organizations do that too, but you can't. I think I'm going to retire and my shoulder hurts a ton.
Yes, we can.
So, you cut me. Oh, the Patriots want me because I have a chance to win?
You know something? I got 500 stories where organizations have done the players wrong, and now y'all coming up with some type of story.
Cece,
what if he's in protest of them not having a competent quarterback?
Okay.
Okay, what?
Listen, you know me. I normally am on the exact same side of this issue as you. And I absolutely agree. I defend every player that ever holds out. Teams cut players under contract all the time when they think the contract terms aren't fair for the team. So if a player has some leverage and wants to hold out, if I was Tom Brady, I would hold out week to week. I'd say, you know what, I want an extra $1 million this week. Like, I always defend the guys on this. This one feels different. It just feels different because if you are saying, I'm retiring at the end of the year, and by the way, I need season-ending surgery, so you don't need me anymore, and then you don't need the surgery anymore.
Well, how many times has the organization said, we don't know if you need surgery, and then as soon as the season's over, you know something, son, I think your shoulder needs, so that happens more so than the player.
And I hate that. And I'm critical of that. This one, again, I think he's a very good pickup. I think he's going to help this team.
So what should he have done this year?
Man,
what should he have done?
It's not like the Packers folded up. The Packers are still going to go out there and try to play. Who is he to be like, you know what, I'm too good to play for the Packers because they're not going anywhere. The rest of that team is still showing up every day in that cold, like, terrible weather at Lambeau that he didn't want to play with.
The Packers get what they deserve when they don't have no backup quarterback and they're sitting at 4-4 and their season's over with. Man, my shoulder hurt. You know something? I'm done with football. You started this all by
saying, I love the Bennetts. I love what they stand for. They're really good people and all of it.
They are.
This doesn't fit in with that narrative.
Well, no. You can, all those things can be true, and you can also.
So he should just go out there and play and not have a chance to win.
Man, there's
what if everyone did
half the league's doing that right now, Cece.
Well, let me tell you guys, after my 16 years of playing, all them stories and you got, those stories are irrelevant, all right? These owners screw the players on a weekly basis. And for y'all to try to get on some type of hobby horse about one guy being able to manipulate the system that he can play for a winner, y'all are tripping.
Cece, as long as we're acknowledging he's manipulating the system, that's all my only point.
The system is manipulated for the players all day.
Agreed. And I am consistently vehemently critical of it. So I just, in this instance, one of the few instances where I'm like, man, this strikes me as really threading the needle on whether or not this is football ethical.
Oh, so you know what? He should go out there like Richard Sherman with a sore Achilles. Now he done tore his Achilles. Now he's out for the season. Let's do that.
No, I just don't think, right.
You
I think
don't know the severity of his injury.
Well,
you don't.
Belichick wouldn't have grabbed him up if there was any chance he was going to bring him in, pay him the $21 million, and then not play.
Jenna, I hate to disagree with you, but they will pass you on a physical if they want you on the team. This is what they asked the coach. Do you want him on the team? Okay, check, shoulder, head, check. Is he questionable? Well, we're going to give him a real physical, all right? There is a look at physical in the NFL. Oh, we need to get him on the field compared to a real physical examination. And it varies based on, does the coach want the player on the team? All right?
We're going to have to
Marty,
leave it there.
good job.
Moving on, the 6-2 Vikings taking on the 4-4 Redskins, he said under his breath so nobody could really hear. The Vikings are leading the NFC North despite being led by Case Keenum. Case Keenum! Why aren't people taking the Vikings seriously, CC?
Well, they've had a lot of injuries. I mean, Sam Bradford, he almost died from a bone bruise to his leg.
Every time.
But this is a much improved team. Why aren't people taking them serious? They lost their probably going to be a Pro Bowl running back in Dalvin Cook, the rookie from Florida State. All right, they lost Sam Bradford. Some of the same things. We thought that they would have a top 5 defense. Their wide receivers, Stephon Diggs has missed a little bit of times, but they've been very, very productive. This is a good Vikings team. This is a big game for them. If the Vikings can get through Washington and get to 7-2, they've already activated Teddy Bridgewater. He might be ready for action, not necessarily this weekend, but he might come back next weekend. The Vikings could maybe roll all the way and have home field advantage if Philadelphia slips, because you don't believe in Philadelphia.
Correct.
All right? The team that would be there to grab it would be the Minnesota Vikings.
Right, or the team we just talked about in the New Orleans Saints. The Vikings are doing this with good enough offense and dominant defense.
Yes.
I mean, they have stars at every level of their defense. I want to key in on one guy, Everson Griffin. Everson Griffin is just the 3rd player since sacks became a stat to have at least 1 sack in the first 8 games of a season. He's had at least 1 sack every game this year. So he's going to get after Kirk Cousins, especially with the banged-up offensive line Washington has. Washington, I think, has the personnel to be a playoff team, but injuries have killed them. Some bad luck in a few games has killed them. They ended up getting some of the luck back last week when they beat Seattle. I think this is a bit of a mismatch this week. I think Minnesota is clearly the better team, and I got to give credit. Jenna, you asked why no one's taking the Vikings seriously. It's because of Casey Keenum. I mean, people don't know his name. It's actually Case Keenum, but people call him Casey Keenum. He's a guy that was a dominant college player at Houston, running a gimmick offense, has bounced around the league since then. People don't think you can be a legitimate team with him at quarterback, but he's played well this year.
I got to tell you, and I don't even know how you would feel about this, Vikings win this game and Teddy Bridgewater's fine, I go with Case Keenum again. And I keep going with Case Keenum. He's won it for him.
You've got a ceiling with him, though. Like, I want to give I give Case credit because he hasn't wrecked their season the way we are seeing certain seasons get wrecked by bad quarterback play. But Teddy Bridgewater, you want to if he is the guy he was pre-injury, then all of a sudden this team really becomes a true Super Bowl threat.
Well, also Case Keenum becomes an asset. Jenna, I do hear your point, though, because the team does have momentum. And
that's
typically, when you put the backup in there and they're able to maintain the momentum, now it's not as if Teddy was the starter. Teddy was injured and was the 3rd teamer. So Bradford was first, Keenum was second, and now Teddy's coming back from a horrific injury. The thing about it is this organization is led by Teddy Bridgewater. So Case is going to have to keep playing at a high level to keep that job.
And go ahead, Jenna.
What's the one thing I've learned on this show more than anything since we started is a win is a win is a win, and you take that win no matter how big it is, no matter how emotional it is, whatever it is, you walk away from Sunday with that W. And you have a guy that's been giving you the W. I just say don't fix
I don't think they'll be in a hurry to pull him because he has done well, to your point.
One note for the Vikings when you're looking at them the rest of the way. No team in the league has an easier final 3 games of the season. Cincinnati, at a broken Green Bay team, and then home for Chicago. So if they are sitting, as you're mentioning, at 10-3, right now being 6-2. You can almost pencil them in for 13-3. Those last 3 weeks of the year, so however impressive their record looks now, expected to get much better at the end of the year.
And Jenna, if the Vikings make it to the Super Bowl, we're going to have a pocket full of what?
So I think it's Posey, but you think it's
money, a pocket.
The Super
I
Bowl's
can't do
there.
the last hour
We
of the
can
show.
do appearances, Jenna. We can make some
full of
extra money in
Posey.
Minnesota.
Do one of these
The
wonderful
Super Bowl's in
servicemen
Minnesota.
want to fill in for
Pocket
Jenna
full
Wolfe
of
the
money.
rest of the way?
If I told you a pocket full of what
Money.
would you no, the expression is pocket full of Posey.
I got to come back.
I've
just
never
to
had a
save
pocket
CC.
full of money before.
CC.
Welcome back to the show, Nick.
Thanks, Jenna.
And finally, Rockets beat the Cavs 117-113. James Harden had a triple-double. LeBron James did not have a triple-double. LeBron had 33 points and 7 assists, but he also turned the ball over how many times, CC?
9?
9 times. Nick, what was your reaction to the Cavs' loss last night?
This was an excellent basketball game. This was a really fun game. Both of these teams were without their second-best player. The Rockets without Chris Paul. The Cavs without Isaiah Thomas. So it was, so it was. I mean, that was a fair matchup, so to speak. But the player that the Cavs missed the most last night was not Isaiah Thomas. It was Tristan Thompson. This game was lost on the offensive glass. The Rockets had 17 offensive rebounds. The Cavs had 4. So the Rockets got 13 extra possessions, including 4 on 1 possession midway through the fourth quarter. And that was the difference in this basketball game. And shout out to James Harden, 35, 10, 10 with 5 steals. First player to do that since 1989. Harden right now probably is your, if you want to do it, like in the top 3 of the MVP discussion very, very early. Harden was great. This was a really good game. The Cavs were locked in. The Cavs were trying. This was not an effort issue. The Rockets were better last night.
I'm going to take some positive things from what I saw from the Cavs, and 2 in that. They were down by 20 early in the game and could have easily gone back to what we've seen these first couple weeks of the season. But no, the second unit fought back. LeBron came back into the game, got him back into the game by halftime. So for me, that's very, very promising. Their half-court offense was a lot more effective than what we've seen to run their half-court offense. And as I told Nick Wright, I hate to be the one to say I told you so, but Jeff Green would be a huge asset for the Cavs. He's always been a player who I liked. He's always been kind of underrated and under the radar, but playing for the Cavs need his skill level, and he's only going to get better as the season goes on.
Jeff Green was excellent last night.
Quick question before we move on back to football. The same way Russ is trying to figure out how to work with other big players, is there a part of it that James Harden is going to have to get through when he gets
Chris Paul back? Absolutely.
Yeah, because you're not going to see 56-point efforts. Is that something where we're going to see him struggle a little bit
No, there's
as well?
going to be an adjustment, especially because they play the same position. Like James Harden started his career as a shooting guard. He's really blossomed as a point guard. Last year, he almost won the MVP as a point guard. Yes, there's going to be an adjustment period. I do want to say one thing about LeBron, because you mentioned the 9 turnovers. When he had an 8-turnover game, I cautioned America. I chastised you a little bit. I said, watch the tape. I said 6 of those turnovers were directly the fault of his teammates. They were great passes. His teammates screwed up. Last night, those 9 turnovers, 8 of them were directly on LeBron. Last night, he was careless with the ball. Last night, he got ripped once. He had a backcourt violation that was absolutely on him. He did a couple offensive fouls. Like, those 9 turnovers were fairly earned by LeBron last night, and that hurt his team. So I want to be fair there for you, CC.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.